I exposed the CEO's fraud and got him fired in one meeting. I never imagined my career would end up colliding with my sense of morality in such a dramatic way. I've always been the kind of person who keeps their head down, does the work, and avoids unnecessary drama. I'm not a saint or anything. I've made mistakes like everyone else, but I try to be decent and honest. So when I tell you that exposing my CEO was the last thing I ever wanted to do, I mean it. I didn't wake up that morning planning to blow up years of stability, friendships, and hard work. But sometimes the truth doesn't give you a choice. I started at this company in my mid-20s. It was a mid-sized tech firm, not one of the flashy giants, but big enough to have a presence and steady contracts. When I first joined, the leadership wasn't perfect, but it was fair. My first CEO knew people by name and would stop by desks to check in. When he retired, we got this new guy, Jared, who came with a shiny resume and big promises about efficiency and maximizing value. At first, I wanted to believe in him. He was charismatic and seemed to know what he was doing. But over time, the cracks started to show. He treated employees like numbers on a spreadsheet. We lost some really talented people because he slashed benefits and refused to invest in development. He cut corners on everything. But he always seemed to find room in the budget for his own bonuses, new cars, and these extravagant dinners with clients that seemed more like ego trips than business strategy. I didn't like it, but I told myself it wasn't my job to police him. My job was to do my work and keep my head down. Then I stumbled onto something I couldn't ignore. I was working late one night on a quarterly report, and I noticed some discrepancies in the financials. At first, I thought it was my mistake. I triple-checked formulas, traced back numbers, and finally realized it wasn't me. Some revenue lines had been artificially inflated. Money from one quarter was being shifted into another to make it look like growth was constant. I flagged it quietly to the finance manager, and that's when she gave me this look that made my stomach drop. She said, "You didn't see that. Just keep working." I couldn't sleep that night. My conscience wouldn't let me. I've seen movies and read stories about corporate fraud, but actually sitting there with the proof in front of me felt surreal. I tried to convince myself maybe there was a legitimate explanation, but the more I dug, the clearer it became. It wasn't just creative accounting. It was deliberate. Jared was cooking the books to mislead the board and the investors. I spent the next couple weeks quietly collecting everything I could. I saved spreadsheets, emails, invoices, all of it. Every time I found more, my anxiety doubled. I kept imagining him finding out what I was doing and ruining my life. But the idea of staying silent was worse. If the company tanked because of his fraud, hundreds of people would lose their jobs. Families depended on those paychecks. And honestly, I couldn't stand to see someone like him winning while everyone else suffered. The breaking point came during a board meeting that I wasn't even supposed to be at. I was invited to present a small update on a project, but after my section I sat in the back while Jared started talking numbers. He was in full salesman mode, bragging about how revenue was up 10% quarter over quarter and how efficiency initiatives were driving growth. My hands were shaking because I knew every word was a lie. I don't know what came over me, but I couldn't sit there anymore. I raised my hand, and before I knew it, words were spilling out of my mouth. I said something like, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's not accurate." The whole room froze. Jared turned the color of a ripe tomato and snapped at me to sit down, but one of the board members asked me to explain. So I did. My voice was shaking, but I walked them through the discrepancies. I showed them how revenue had been shifted across quarters, how expenses were hidden, how contracts were misrepresented. I pulled out printed documents I had brought just in case. The more I laid out, the quieter the room got. Jared tried to cut me off, tried to laugh it off, even accused me of misunderstanding basic accounting, but by then it was too late. The numbers spoke for themselves. It felt like time stopped. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I was fired, but instead the board asked Jared to step out of the room. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. Then they turned back to me and asked if I would be willing to send them everything I had. I nodded, still shaking. One of them said, "You did the right thing." That was the moment I realized my life had just changed. Within a week, Jared was resigning effective immediately. The official line was that he wanted to pursue other opportunities, but everyone inside the company knew the truth. Word spread fast. Some people looked at me like a hero, others like I had just thrown a grenade into their world. HR pulled me aside and said I was protected, but I still worried every single day that I'd be blacklisted in the industry. The weeks after were a blur. The board appointed an interim CEO. Morale slowly started to climb, and for the first time in years, people weren't afraid to speak up. But for me, it was complicated. I felt relief, but also guilt. I didn't want to be the center of attention. I didn't want whispers in the break room. And I definitely didn't want to be the reason a man, even a terrible one, lost his career. But then I'd remember the lies, the bonuses he gave himself while cutting staff pay, the families he would have left high and dry if the company collapsed. That's what keeps me steady. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. I just refused to let him drag the rest of us down with him. Even now, months later, I sometimes question whether I did the right thing. My therapist says that's normal. She told me whistleblowers often wrestle with guilt even when their actions are justified. I guess that's because most of us don't want to be heroes. We just want to do our jobs and live our lives in peace. But sometimes life puts you in a position where doing nothing feels like complicity. And when that happens, silence isn't really an option. I don't know what's next for me. Part of me wants to leave the company and start fresh somewhere else, where I'm not that person who exposed the CEO. But another part of me thinks maybe I owe it to myself to stick around and see if this place can truly change. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. What I do know is that I'll never forget that meeting, the feeling of standing up even though my knees were shaking, and the silence in the room when the truth finally cut through all his lies. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, but maybe also the bravest.